All right. Strong words there from my cousin Fred. And obviously, we're going to talk about the Chiefs. I'm pretty sure my guy Zach has a lot to say about that when we do get to our pretenders and contenders, segment here on the show. But before we get there, I was looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to this every single year. And, I love all the topics that we discuss here on the show on a show basis. But it's always those yearly segments that we always, have to stick around each year to look forward to, that I always look forward to the most, whether that be quarterback rankings, whether that be head coaching rankings, or whether that be midseason awards. And here we are. Week 9 is pretty much done. And it's time for us to talk about who are the best players and coaches thus far this season. And Zach, the way how, I was thinking about doing it, I'm not sure if you want to give your top 3. I don't know if you want to go 1, 2, and 3 or 3, 2, and 1, but it's all you.
We start an MVP or coach?
Yeah, we're going to start MVP.
All right, sounds good. So I'll do 3, 2, 1, and then you could go 3, 2, 1, and we could discuss from there. All right, so MVP. One thing I'll say about this award and the race for it right now, before I name any candidates, is I think looking at the market for this award this year, especially compared to years past, I think it's pretty difficult, right? Like usually we always do this segment like around this time of the year, and throughout the last couple of years when we've done it, I felt pretty confident about like the guys I'm giving out and who I'm going to have 1, who I'm going to have 2, who I'm going to have 3 going in. And that wasn't the case this year. I could really list about 7, 8, like maybe even more guys that I definitely considered that I think maybe in other years, like I think they might have had a realistic case. So I just wanted to say that off the start. This wasn't easy. Before I get into it, Lil, I know you made some signals there. You agree?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think with my number 3, who I'm not going to name until I get there, you can make the argument that he probably shouldn't be there. But I think somebody or not knowing a lot of guys that took the bull by the horns allowed him to just get to number 3. Whereas if we shot this a week ago, he won't be here. We'll find out who that guy is.
All right. Without further ado, I'm ready to get into my top 3. And I will go at number 3, a running back. And it's crazy because a running back, or really just a non-quarterback in general, has not won this award since Adrian Peterson did in 2012. It's been over a decade. But I'm going to go with Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers for me coming in at number 3. He leads the NFL in rushing yards. He's number 2 in the league in rushing touchdowns with 9. And this 49ers team, since they traded for him about this time last year, he has literally scored a touchdown in every single game that he has played with in San Francisco, which is really impressive. I do think that he adds a little bit more of a different dynamic to this offense. Like when you have a guy like McCaffrey, that's a true home run hitter that could just hit that home run each and every time he gets the ball. We know that Brock Purdy's been struggling a little bit with the turnovers at the quarterback position. San Francisco has a big game this week coming off the bye in Jacksonville. Looking forward to that one. But I do think that McCaffrey, if you ask me, like, who is the most valuable, important piece to that San Francisco offense, I would go with Christian McCaffrey. There was even a point earlier in the season where I might have had him at number 1 as my favorite to win the MVP, but I'll give him his respect. I'll give the running back position some respect. I'll have Christian McCaffrey as my number 3 candidate for MVP. At number 2, we will get into the quarterbacks now. I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson of the Ravens coming in at number 2. And with Lamar, for me, it's so interesting because even though I was in favor of a change at offensive coordinator, it was very clear to me that Greg Roman had to go. I think time has run its course there with him and Lamar. They needed to change. They needed some new looks, more creative looks on offense. At the same time, though, I was a little bit concerned that triggering to a more pass-focused offense might not necessarily be the best thing for Lamar and to get the best out of him, but it's been the opposite. And there are two differences about Lamar that have really changed for me watching him this year compared to last year. One is a statistical thing, like a stat number change, and the other is just an eye test change. Lamar, like prior to this year, throughout his career, had been about completing like 63, 64% of his passes, which is good, but nothing spectacular. And then if you look at it this year, he's completing 70% of his passes, and he's been really, really accurate. And that's elite. Like when you put up a completion percentage like that, you usually think of like the check down artists, like, Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, guys that, are accurate, but they don't really throw the ball deep that much, and they don't love to make those mistakes. But Lamar Jackson, man, like some of the throws he's making, just putting the ball in the exact perfect spot, exactly where it has to be at every time. It's really impressive. The Ravens are rolling. Another very impressive win on Sunday against the Seahawks. What is he now, like 19-1 overall in his career against the NFC? It's very obvious that these other teams that have to game plan for him that aren't really used to him, like they don't see him that much in the NFC, that's a tough matchup. They have no idea what's coming. I think even though the weapons aren't great, they're still much better than they've been in years past. Gus Edwards has done a great job running the ball over the course of the last couple of games. Keaton Mitchell, this young kid, he had a huge game on Sunday. I'm curious to see what his role is going forward. I think Lamar has had a great start to the season. The Todd Monken hire has worked out in a big way so far. I will have a one-time MVP coming in at number 2, Lamar Jackson. And number 1, I'm curious how you feel about this and how everyone listening feels, because I feel like not a lot of people are going to have this guy at number 1. And I think when you look at this guy's numbers, although they've been very good the last 2 to 3 weeks, his season as a whole, when you look at his numbers, might not necessarily be MVP worthy. But when you watch the games and you watch him play, you know that this guy is the reason why his team is 8-1, and that's Jalen Hurts.
I know he was going there.
The Eagles. And dude, like, here's the thing about the Eagles, right? I don't even love this team. Like, I think they're very vulnerable. I think they were fortunate to beat the Cowboys on Sunday. I think there were about 4 or 5 things that really went in their way that could have gone Dallas's way that ended up winning them the game. I wasn't that impressed with Philly. I think their pass defense is very vulnerable. I don't trust Nick Sirianni as a head coach in a big game. They miss Shane Steichen. Like, there are plenty of flaws with this Eagles team, but literally the reason why they're 8-1 is because of their quarterback. And the thing about Jalen Hurts for me is he's doing things this year from a passing perspective that we just simply thought he wasn't capable of 2 years ago, as recent as that. And how much he's improved as a passer is really impressive to me. And teams have kind of focused and have been dialed in on stopping him as a runner. I know that might be skewed a little bit because he has so many rushing touchdowns, but when you look at just how good this guy has been passing the ball and that insane chemistry he has with A.J. Brown, it's just super impressive. The last couple games, last week against Dallas, 2 touchdowns passing, no interceptions. The week before against Washington, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. The week before that against Miami, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Like, his last 3 games, Jalen Hurts has 8 passing touchdowns and 1 interception. So he's doing a better job limiting those turnovers. And more importantly, man, I just think without him, like, the Eagles aren't that good. Like, if he gets hurt and they have to put Marcus Mariota in the game, I think this team would fall off a cliff and they could lose to anyone. That's how valuable I think he is to this team. What he did in the Super Bowl last year was very impressive. And I think as the season goes on this year, and those, I know the interception number might look a little bit high right now. He has 7. I don't expect that number to keep growing and growing throughout the season. I think he limits those. I think he's been the most valuable player in the league so far, and I would vote him as my number 1 MVP candidate in 2023. So to recap my top 3, of Christian McCaffrey of the Niners coming in at number 3, Lamar Jackson of the Ravens coming in at number 2, and Jalen Hurts of the Eagles coming in at number 1.
Yeah, so, I'm going to go ahead with my list, and then we could make the stop at the Jalen Hurts, guy. Maybe I have him number 1. Maybe I don't. We'll find out. But we'll make the ending stop at Jalen Hurts for further dialogue. At number 3 on my list, and before I get to mine, you know how I evaluate what an MVP is. But for those of y'all who's going to watch this show when this show goes up into clips that never saw me before or know how I evaluate an MVP, is relatively simple. If you were subtracted from your team would not be winning games. Okay? It's simple as that. And yeah, the fancy stats go along with that. I do take that in consideration, but it's not the be all end all, but it definitely is highly in consideration. Winning is in consideration. And also, once again, if you were subtracted, then you won't be, your team won't be good. So number 3, I'm going to go with Joe Burrow at number 3. I think he is definitely rising. If I had to make a bold prediction, I think he ultimately, slightly, may win it. May. Because the guy who I got at number 1, I'm not sure if that guy is going to slow down right now. But if he does, I think Joe Burrow will win that award. As a matter of fact, on DraftKings, he is the most bet player to win that award. Look, it's that simple for me. I understand It was a rocky start playing with that calf injury. But first off, him playing through that, we was at risk with Joe Burrow for further injury or something worse. Remember, Aaron Rodgers had a calf injury that he battled throughout the summer that turned into an Achilles injury. And those two things do correlate. We was in a danger zone. And the fact that Joe Burrow, week 1, we was questioning, whether it's week 3 coming back, week 4. I remember that segment we doing the show. And he came back week 1 and he played through it. That's value right there. That's a quarterback who's going to go all out for his teammates and try to, at least give his team a chance to win games. And for the most part, he did, even though he lost a couple games to start off the year. And then once he got to the, other side of the calf injury, out of the danger zone, I would call it, the last 4 games, there's no quarterback that has been better than Joe Burrow the last 4 games. None whatsoever. Maybe my number 1 guy. Maybe. But as far as being a pocket passer, there's no better quarterback that is a better pocket passer, a better quarterback in the pocket than Joe Burrow. And no need to debate me here because you will be debating a war, not me. Okay, he's the best quarterback in the pocket with the throws he's able to make, the completion percentage. Nobody does it better. And there's a reason why I had him number 1 in my quarterback rankings. I really do feel Joe Burrow is arguably the best quarterback and probably is the best quarterback in the National Football League. I would accept Mahomes debates. Obviously not right now because we homed that in before. That's something that I would accept and I would actually understand because of the out structure ability of Mahomes. But let's talk about this stat real quickly before I move on to my next guy right here. Burrow went from being 33rd in the league the first month of the season on completion percentage, and now he went to being number 1, that quickly. And we know why that is. There's no other reason. It wasn't that he was playing bad. Yeah, he kind of was, but it was because of the calf injury. And now that that's nipped up, he's able to be more mobile, running for first downs, creating, and being the great pocket pass he is. I like Joe Burrow. I think he did enough in the last 4 games. If you ask me, I'm telling you right now, ahead of time, I think he did enough in those last 4 games with statement games against very good teams, right? Obviously, competition matters. The 49ers, the Bills, statement victories. I like Joe Burrow at number 3. At number 2, I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill at number 2. I'm also going to take a non-quarterback in my rankings here. I didn't like the last game. I thought Tyreek Hill was a little bit too much amped up, going against his former team, and he dropped the ball, literally. A fumble that led to a touchdown probably was the difference in the game, and ultimately the difference from him not being number 1 on my list to being number 2. I really think he's that valuable. Like, we got to really talk and have a serious conversation about Tyreek Hill because the reason why the defenses are actually playing better is mainly because of Tyreek Hill. Like, literally, when, teams started playing this too high safety, it was to stop Tyreek Hill. It was to stop Tyreek Hill. It wasn't to stop Patrick Mahomes. They don't even do too high safety no more against the Chiefs. It wasn't to stop Kelsey. It was to stop Tyreek Hill. And more teams started playing more zone. And literally, he changed the game. Almost like Steph, with Steph shooting a 3 ball. And if you're not a center that know how to shoot the 3, chances are you ain't going to make a lot of money. Yeah, just like that, Tyreek Hill changed the modern game. And nobody talks about it. And I'm seeing it. And it's funny because even though the game has changed and more teams are down in explosive plays, the most explosive team was the Dolphins, ironically, with Tyreek Hill. So that means a lot. And, I thought he tried to rebound at times, on Sunday. Like I said, it wasn't the best game. But before that, he has been the best wide receiver in the league to me. And it's not close. The closest will be A.J. Brown to that conversation. Justin Jefferson kind of got hurt, so he won't be in that conversation. But I think, you look at his numbers, the Dolphins offense has the most 40+ yard plays. Most of those plays are coming from Tyreek Hill, and he's on pace for 2,000 yards, which is the key here. Something that hasn't been done since Megatron. So I think Tyreek Hill is going to finish the year off strong, like how he started, and he's going to be a 2,000-yard wide receiver this year. I like him at number 2. At number 1, this was actually easy for me. Number 2 and number 3 was hard, but number 1 was easy. There's one guy that has been the best football player this year, and that's Lamar Jackson at number one for me. He's the best player on the best team in the National Football League. And I'm really happy for Lamar Jackson because I actually challenged him a lot this offseason. I started losing faith in Lamar Jackson. I'm like, yeah, 2019, he came on strong, took the league by storm. His second year, won the MVP. And I'm like, he hasn't done anything since but not be available. And I challenged him. And even though he was available, his numbers was down. So I'm like, is there another gear? Did he peak? Was he a one-trick pony? He got the money. Could he live up to it? And boy, not only has he lived up to it, this is his best season of his career. Like, think about it. This guy was already hard to guard, just being strictly an out structure type of quarterback with the mobility. With the passing game needed to improve. He was already hard to guard. Now that he's excelling in the passing statistics and as a passer with the eye test, he's harder to guard. He's even more harder to guard. And that's that, like, think about it. I watch, the game through and through. Sometimes I look at the stats, and maybe when we do a take, I may go stat heavy. But trust me, I am watching the game. And I know what I see from the X's and O's in the movements. There will be times in the past where I saw Lamar Jackson, one read, take off. One read, take off. It's not there, we are out. Now he's showing very good, pocket awareness, allowing the play to evolve, going through progression, and making the right play at the right time. And that's why he's number one. Another thing, too, that I want to address. He's leading the league in completion percentage, 71%, as you alluded to. And guess what? This is the difference. He only threw 3 interceptions. And I'm going to pick up with that, responding to Jalen Hurts. So to recap my list, at number 3, I'm going Joe Burrow. At number 2, I'm going Tyreek Hill. And number 1, my midseason MVP is Lamar Action Jackson. And the pickup with the 3 interceptions, right? Look, to me, when you talk about Jalen Hurts, when you talk about Patrick Mahomes, the reason why those 2 quarterbacks didn't make my list, and they were close. I'm not sure where I had Jalen Hurts. I don't think I had him in my top 5. I may have had him 5 if we went that long. Maybe. CJ Stroud was a guy that, I thought about. We can obviously dive into that. But the reason why Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes was not in my top 3 was because of those interceptions. I don't think you could win or be an MVP almost leading the league in that category. I believe Jimmy Garoppolo has 9 and Hurts and Mahomes has 8. And I value that because the reason why you are winning games, that stat is evident to me. The reason why you are able to overcome those interceptions and still only have a loss or 2 losses, in the Chiefs case, is because your team has been carrying the slack, and that's what it is. And Jalen Hurts is a guy that bounced back, and I get it. And I love that about him. That's his best attribute. It's his ability to bounce back. But he does have a good team. I really do feel that A.J. Brown was also in this category. That kind of subtracted away from Hurts a little bit too, because if I'm considering 2 guys as an MVP, then that's a conflict of interest because you're not the most clearly valuable guy to your own team. Like, if you're not the most valuable guy to your team, definitively, then you're not going to be in the league for me. And I don't think that way about Hurts with A.J. Brown being there. I think about it. When A.J. Brown got traded over there, that's when Hurts take that next leap, So it was close. I had him about 5.
Question about that, though. So do you, I understand that, when you ask, okay, who's the most valuable piece to the Dolphins? Yeah, it's Tyreek Hill. But where did Tua rank in this for you? Did he come close to making your top 3? Because that's really why, for that same reason, I didn't put Tyreek, because I think Tua could easily be in this conversation as well.
He didn't make my top 5. He probably wouldn't have made my top 7. Would he have made my top 10? Yes, but not top 7, not top 5. And the reason why was because I thought he had 2 games in high quality situations. The Eagles game, ironically, Sunday Night Football, he threw that interception that really cost the team the game when they was trying to bounce back in that game. That game, literally, that interception ended the game and pretty much signified that they had no shot to beat the Eagles. he lost him that game with that throw. And that's prime time. I'm watching that game. I'm literally watching everything about that game. Sunday, the Chiefs, another high profile game, arguably game of the week. Morning, I'm up. I'm watching that game. I'm not watching Red Zone. He had a bad game. He missed those. We saw how that game ended. Cedric Wilson was wide open, and he threw that ball like a T-Rex. If a T-Rex was able to throw a ball, it would look like that. It didn't get there. Then he formed the snap. He literally lost the team that game. So because I can tell, and you had certain plays that lost your team games in prime time moments, not to mention your prime time record against good teams in general, I couldn't put him here. So I thought the space was big enough for me to put Tyreek Hill, and those two games really moved down to a lot for me because I value those things.
Didn't Tyreek Hill's fumble though? Didn't that the Chiefs return for touchdown? Like I thought that really cost them the game more.
It did. It did. It was one game, but other than that, I thought Tyreek Hill played really, really great up to that point, and that's that. Like it's different. You hold a quarterback to a different standard than you do a wide receiver. The quarterback obviously is supposed to be the leader of the franchise. He's supposed to make the right play at the end of the game. He's supposed to be clutch. The wide receivers control what they can control, which is catching the ball. It was a bad fumble, but other than that, he's been near perfect, and his impact on a game-by-game basis that we don't typically see or we don't acknowledge is the fact that every time he's on the field, the game is being structured around him. It's not being structured around Tua. It's not being structured around Jalen Waddle. It's being structured. The game plan is about stopping Tyreek Hill. Where is Tyreek Hill on the field? Is he over here? We got to spy. We got to have two guys on this guy. We got to follow Tyreek Hill. And then when you incorporate motion, guys got to move. So it's always about Tyreek Hill, whether it was on the Chiefs, even with the Chiefs, bro. Even when you had Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey on the same team, trust me, it wasn't only about stopping Mahomes. It wasn't only about stopping Kelsey. It was about stopping Tyreek Hill first. He's valuable.
So responding to your point about Hurts and the interceptions, I just wanted to give everyone some context. So right now, there are 4 guys that are tied in leading the league in interceptions with 9. It's Jimmy G, Josh Allen, Mac Jones, and Sam Howell. Then there are 3 guys tied for second with 8. Mahomes, Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts, right? So right now, technically Jalen Hurts is tied for second, but there are 4 guys ahead of him, and he has the same amount as 2 other guys. Now, I did some research. Last year, Mahomes wins the MVP, right? And he ended the season with 12 interceptions, which was behind, 7 guys. So he was 8th in the league in interceptions. Then the year prior to that, Aaron Rodgers, he wins the MVP, and he did not rank in the top 10 in picks. So, and that was actually 2021. And then in 2020, when Rodgers won the MVP the first time, he wasn't in the top 10 either. So I just look back last year, Mahomes, he won the award and he was 8th in interceptions. And right now, Hurts is right around there. So I think that with just how well he's played and just how much he's carried this team, again, Will, I'm not that high on the Eagles right now. I think they're right for the taking.
I want to respond.
I know we both had this.
I want to respond to that Patrick Mahomes comparison, right? Because there's a couple factors that we need to consider. Number one, these are mid-season. So 12 is not a great number, but it's not the most terrible number. Obviously, you said where it ranked. It was top 10. But when you talk about mid-season, right now, he's top 2 in interceptions, along with Jalen Hurts. So 2 and 8 is a big difference. Another thing that we have to consider, Jalen Hurts got A.J. Brown. Patrick Mahomes just lost a number 1 wide receiver last year in Tyreek Hill and still was able to have the number 1 seed, which is also, you could factor that. That's obviously in consideration. And he was able to have the best scoring offense after losing a number 1 weapon like Tyreek Hill. That's why he was my MVP too last year on top of that.
Yeah. I look at the last 3 games for Hurts. Again, 8 touchdowns, 1 pick. I think he's really put the Eagles on his back. I think he did that against Washington especially. And man, I think this team is right for the pick. Hurts is also banged up, which doesn't help his cause either. He's not 100% healthy. If he was, you can only imagine what his numbers would look like. He might even be even better. But man, unlike last year, I think the Eagles are very vulnerable, right? Again, I think they easily could have lost that game to Dallas. And literally, like, I think the only reason why I have confidence in them to win most of these games is because of number one at quarterback. And again, he's not running the ball, which is crazy. Like, even going into this year, a lot of people still had questions about him as a passer and if he would be able to take that next step without having to run the ball as much, with teams a little bit more familiar and locking in on stopping him as a runner. But he's really, really improved as a passer, which has stood out to me as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, Jalen Hurts will probably be number 5 on my list, but like I said, we know why I didn't put him number 3, because of those interceptions. Now it's good to see him turning that around, and if he continues to turn that around and they continue to win games, then the second half he may be in the top 3. We'll have to see. I just think for me, I look at the Eagles team and I'm giving the Eagles team a little bit more credit. I'm giving AJ Brown a little bit more credit. He string together prior to last week 5 straight games of 100 plus yards receiving and more, 125 plus, I believe, something to that effect. And I'm taking that in consideration. I'm taking the leap in consideration that Hurts took when AJ Brown was traded for. And I'm just giving them more credit. I think they're a hard team to beat. Look how good the Cowboys played on Sunday. They played well enough to win that game. They still couldn't. The Eagles know how to win every single type of game. Ugly game, shootout, whatever it is. They dominate the time of possession. They can run the football. They're well coached. I'm just giving a little bit more respect to the Eagles team. Whereas with the 3 guys that I pick, I think really you subtract them. I don't think the Dolphins will be as explosive without Tyreek Hill. I don't think the Bengals will still be winning games without Joe Burrow. I don't think the Ravens will be as good without Lamar Jackson.
One last point on Hurts before we move on. We know both one thing we have in common when it comes to the criteria of what we value for this award. Winning is obviously right up there. And Jalen Hurts in the regular season, the last 2 years as a starter, the Eagles are 23-2 in those games. That's valuable to me.
Definitely. And y'all make sure y'all leave a comment. Who are y'all top 3 MVP midseason candidates so far? Let us know. And I'm ready to go coach here. It's going to be fun. Coach, I would love to start us off there to switch the order a little bit. And look, this was probably tougher than the MVP one. No. I lied. It was easier. But it was more, it was around the same. But anyway, enough chatting. At number 3, I'm going to go with D'Amico Ryans at number 3. I think when you're able to have success and still be in a division in which I remember, in the summertime, he was like, listen, there's no way the Jaguars lose this division. Now, granted, still think they're going to win it, but I did not expect competition from anybody in this division. Okay, and the Texans is giving them competition. They actually defeated them earlier this year. So if they win against them again, they might be in a situation where they could steal this division. And you got to give credit to D'Amico Ryans for changing the culture, and especially the run defense. This was not amongst. They were the worst rush defense last year. And now they are top 10 in that category. And we know when D'Amico Ryans left the 49ers, they're actually in the middle, not in the top 2. Matter of fact, they were number 1 last year with D'Amico Ryans, and now they are top 10, rushing defense, which is a drop significantly. And obviously the Texans are much better and around the same, stratosphere as the 49ers with lesser players. Like literally, like that's impact to me. And the changing of the culture, the quarterback is playing well. Listen, it's hard not to like this team right now. It's hard. It really is. And that's why D'Amico Ryans is number 3 for me. I think going forward, the Texans could be a team to look out for in the future. They might be a contender again in the future. Not this year, but in the future, I think they will be. And that's because of D'Amico and because of their quarterback. Great combination. I like what they're building. I like D'Amico Ryans at number 3. At number 2, I'm going to go with John Harbaugh here at number 2. The fact that the Athletic and the Ringer got Mike Tomlin number 1 over this guy. Listen, I don't know what the hell y'all doing. I don't know what the hell y'all watching. And that's where we start to expose the popularity contest that is these awards from these, local media, sports outlets, whatever websites, whatever these are. We expose the popularity contest that it is, because ain't no way that you can sit here with a straight face and tell me Mike Tomlin has been a better coach than John Harbaugh. Okay, with all due respect, because credit to John Harbaugh for getting rid of a mediocre play caller from an offensive coordination perspective and Greg Roman, okay, and not being scared to fire this guy when he had every excuse in the book to bring this guy back. He could have said, my quarterback got hurt the last 2 years. What you expect for me to do? But still, he fired him, right? And he got Todd Monken, who has gotten the best out of Lamar Jackson. That one move saved Lamar Jackson's career. That one move, okay? So we don't respect art. We don't respect talent. We're not going to take that in consideration here. Like, nah. Like, even when Lamar Jackson was out and we go back to that playoff game against the Bengals in a wild card, they did everything in the book to win that game. They were well coached. Tyler Huntley just wanted to be a superhero that day and be all on Sports Center, all on Channel 5 News and all that. And he tried to jump over the end zone and got the ball knocked out. Should have been a holding on that return. That would have made a difference, and they lost that game. But they were well coached. John Harbaugh needs a little bit more respect. Understand that Zay calls him overrated, but he needs to have that same energy when it comes to Mike Tomlin. Once again, we're going back to the popularity contest. Okay, I like Mike Tomlin too. I do. And we're going to talk about him, in the Steelers and the pretenders, contenders category we have coming up. But it's not about popularity. It's about wins. It's about, winning the game. It's about coaching the game, right? Putting the right, pieces on the chessboard. And John Harbaugh has done that. And that's why he's number 2. Matter of fact, the Ravens are arguably the best team in the NFL. Got to give John Harbaugh credit for that. I like him at number 2. And at number 1, I'm going to go with Dan Campbell here, having his team 6-2 on the verge of accomplishing something that the franchise hasn't done in about 30 years. And that creates a little separation for me to put him at number 1. We have to realize that the Lions were forgotten about after Matthew Stafford got traded. They were forgotten about for a couple years. And he did a very good job coaching them into believing that they can build something, with that rah-rah attitude, and that I didn't know that you could win games that way with the rah-rah, but clearly he changed the game of coaching in a way, bringing that rah-rah. Now you see Deion Sanders bringing that rah-rah, and now Antonio Perez, rah-rah. Like, he's changing the game to be a head coach. Yes, you don't have to be X and O's hands-on, but yeah, he got a good coordinator in Ben Johnson to take that next leap with Jared Goff, to put him in positions to call great, plays and make him feel comfortable. And it's one thing to coach a team to believe that they can win games and become a prominent franchise and a franchise that could contend. But it's another thing to coach them to believe in the hype. So we have the Lions pre-hype, and now we have the Lions post-hype. And each time they handled it well. Like, going into this year, there was no team with as much hype as the Lions were. No team. It was all the hype over there. The way how they ended last year, winning that game, spoiling Aaron Rodgers' return to the playoffs, and coming into this year when everybody's picking you to win the North and saying you may go to the Super Bowl and all that and NFC Championship game. He did a hell of a coaching job to actually live up to the hype. They only lost 2 games. It was 2 games. One was a shootout to the Seahawks. Another, it was probably the worst game that they played all year, to a very good, arguably the best team in the AFC right now in the Ravens. And, Lamar Jackson's record against NFC teams, no excuse. It was a bad game, but they played well for the most part in every other game they played. And they beat the Chiefs. They're handling their division. I think they already won their division, even though mathematically they didn't. I think they did. And that's something that they haven't done. History was made. We have to respect history. And that's why Dan Campbell is number 1 for me. So to recap my list, at number 3 is D'Amico Ryans. At number 2 is John Harbaugh. And number 1, my coach of the year, mid-season, is Dan Campbell.
Yeah, well, I like the list a lot. We have a lot of the same names. I'll get into mine and we'll discuss from there. So I'll agree with you. I'll also have D'Amico Ryans at number 3. I think you made a lot of really good points. He's done a great job changing that culture. And even though like I liked the Texans offseason, I know that there was a lot of buzz, a lot of chatter, a lot of conversation about the trade they made with the Cardinals and them giving up their first round pick next year to draft Will Anderson and to move up in the draft. But honestly, if you ask anyone in that Texans building right now, they will tell you that they are thrilled they made that move because it gave them CJ Stroud. And there was a lot of people saying like, man, the quarterback class this year, it's not really that good. Just wait until next year when you have Caleb Williams, you have Drake May. Like there's no point in even drafting a quarterback this year. But the Texans didn't listen. They pointed out CJ Stroud. They said, this is our guy. And it could turn out to be the best decision they've ever made. I'll also give Ryans credit on the offensive coordinator he brought over with him to Houston from San Francisco. His name is Bobby Slowick. He used to work for PFF, kind of like a no-name going into this season. He was the 49ers passing game coordinator, kind of took over that McDaniel role when he left, and he has done wonders for CJ Stroud. I think he's going to be a head coach in this league next year, and there's no doubt that the Houston Texans believe, and they're a legitimate playoff contender right now. I mean, hey, one thing you didn't mention, in that game against Tampa Bay, they lost their kicker like early in that game, and then to go for 2. They had a backup running back kicking extra points, and they still find a way to win, even with Tampa Bay taking the lead late. There's a lot of belief in that locker room. I'm a big D'Amico Ryans fan. I think there's a reason why Denver even wanted him over Sean Payton originally when they started their search. I think he's a very impressive candidate. I will have him at number 3. At number 2, I'm going to go with the guy that you haven't mentioned. And I'm going to go with Kevin O'Connell of the Vikings. I'm going to give him a lot of credit for what this team has done so far this season. And when you look at Minnesota so far, it's been a tough, very interesting road for them to get here and where they are right now. They're sitting at 5-4. They've won 4 games in a row, but it wasn't that long ago that they were sitting at 1-4 after they lost to the Chiefs at home. But their last 4 games, they've beaten the Bears, they've beaten the Niners, they've gone into Lambeau and won. And then on Sunday was the most impressive of them all, going into Atlanta and beating the Falcons after losing Jaron Hall in the first quarter of that game and having to play a guy that literally just got to Minnesota a couple days earlier. And the videos and stories coming out of that game were just wild of Josh Dobbs on the sideline, like practicing the snaps with the center, making sure everyone was on the same page, learning the plays. I think Jordan Addison had to tell him in the huddle what route he was going to run on that last drive, and the fact that they were able to go into Atlanta and win a game like that, super impressive. I think it would have been very easy for this team to just quit after they lost Justin Jefferson, after they lost Kirk Cousins for the season. Everyone was telling us and them last year was a fluke. They're the worst 13 lost win team we've ever seen, and that was kind of justified when they lost that playoff game to the Giants, and after their 1-4 start this year, but O'Connell, he knew his defense didn't have a lot of great personnel, especially after this offseason, that competitive rebuild. So what did he say? I'm going to bring in arguably the best defensive coordinator that was out there, Brian Flores. And the thing with him is it doesn't matter how much talent is on your defense. When you have him, he's creative enough to throw looks at the opposing offenses to really give your team a chance. No matter what personnel they have, I think O'Connell deserves a lot of credit for that hire. And as crazy as this sounds, you look at the possible playoff teams in the NFC right now, there aren't a lot of teams you feel great about. And I'm starting to think that when we get to the end of the season, I would not be shocked at all if Josh Dobbs and Kevin O'Connell are leading this Viking team to the playoffs with Jefferson coming back. He was activated off IR today. That's only going to help. You have Addison. Madison scored a touchdown on Sunday. I am in on this Viking team, and I'm in on Kevin O'Connell. I think he's done a great job. And looking at their schedule, they have another huge home game on Sunday against the Saints. I think they win that game, and that only gets his Coach of the Year conversation and his candidacy even bigger. So I'll go with Kevin O'Connell of the Vikings at number 2. And at number 1, we're on the same page. I'll stay in the NFC North. I'll go with Dan Campbell of the Lions. As great as this team played to end last season, I was still a little skeptical going in. I didn't love their draft. I didn't know if Jared Goff was going to be able to do what he did last year, and he's done that. And like you said, Dan Campbell, he just has this team believing any game they play in, he's going to have them confident. He's going to have them ready to go. That Raven game, they're allowed one mulligan. They're allowed one bad game, especially with how good Lamar Jackson has been against the NFC. That roster's loaded. He has them believing. And again, like I think it's important to remember, like you mentioned, that when they made that Stafford trade and Dan Campbell was telling everyone in the press in his opening press conference, we're gonna bite your kneecaps and just find ways to win. There were a lot of people skeptical, including myself, but it's clear that he has those guys ready to play. He has them believing. And honestly, Lil, like if you ask me, gun to my head right now, I can't believe I'm saying this, but if you were to ask me, Zach, if you were to pick one team, like who do you think right now is going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl? It's very hard for me not to say the Lions. I think they're clearly playing the best football of anyone in the NFC right now. And if you look at their schedule, I think that's going to continue. They're going to have home playoff games in that dome, which is going to be, really helpful for that offense to keep on scoring. Their defense has gotten better. It's improved. Number one wasn't really a question for me. I'll go with Dan Campbell as well. So to recap my list, I will go with DeMeco Ryans of the Texans at 3. I'll go Kevin O'Connell of the Vikings at 2. And I will go with Dan Campbell of the Lions at number 1.
Yeah, so I like the Kevin O'Connell pick. He was literally in consideration. He probably would have been number 4 on mine. And I value, when you're not having resources, how you're able to economize those resources that you do have, and are you able to win games? And I think we have seen Kevin O'Connell have his best year. And not only that, but Kirk Cousins' best year. I mean, we talking about a guy who played for 2 franchises, played a lot of football, played in the playoffs a couple times, and his best stint, though with age, guy aging, but he's aging like fine wine because of Kevin O'Connell. His best 2 years, Kirk Cousins, was with Kevin O'Connell statistically. And I think from the eye test, I think he had his best win against the 49ers. That was a game that they probably should have won, and they won. Joshua Dobbs, as you alluded to, that was a very good win. They were not supposed to win that game, and that's more about Arthur Smith, unfortunately, for you, Zach. I know that's your guy. That's more about the Falcons and how terrible that loss was. And that was more about, on the flip side, about the Vikings and how they're able to play with the culture. The culture is just different around there, right? They have some leadership over there, and it starts with Kevin O'Connell. And they're rallying around Kirk Cousins. They're rallying around the coach. Even from an X's and O's perspective, offensively, I'm seeing some great designs that's freeing up, open receivers down the football field. And some of those things we don't really, take in, but I see him, and I like that pick a lot. There's one guy that I think.
Before you get into that, one quick point I want to make on O'Connell too that I forgot to mention. I think he's done a better coaching job this year throughout 9 games than he did last year when they won 13 games, and we all knew it was just fluky. Like, I think everyone was expecting, even with Cousins, even with Jefferson, and we saw it throughout the first 5 weeks, for regression to go the other way, for this team to take a step back, and it would have been easy for them to quit without Cousins, without Jefferson, but they're just finding a way to get it done.
Yeah, and I think if this team had Kirk Cousins and Jefferson healthy right now, you could make the case they were a better football team than they were last year, even though the record may have not shown that thus far. But I think
we can't underrate that. Like, that might have been the best coordinator hire that was made this past offseason, because the Vikings defense, like, they don't have great personnel, but they're getting the job done.
Yeah, they are. And that's another thing, putting your guys in position, getting the right DC, getting the right OC, and that's what I prioritize. And unfortunately, when we come back to Mike Tomlin and all these media guys putting him number 1, the fact that Matt Canada is still there, listen, that's a problem to me. And that's where I'm just like, yeah, I'm off that ship. But it's funny because when you look at that division, I don't even think he's number 2. Like, if you ask me today, strictly AFC North, your midseason coach of the years, number 1, clearly John Harbaugh is number 2 on my list overall. He will be number 1. And you can make the argument number 2 could be between 2 guys. And maybe it's Kevin Stefanski, and maybe it's the Bengals coach, Zac Taylor. Because number 1, he had to juggle the situation. I'm talking about Zac Taylor here with Joe Burrow and his calf injury. Do I put him on IR? Do I sit him a game? How do I manage that? That's good coaching. And every time, the last 2 years, he was put in tough situations. The DeMar Hamlin situation, I thought he handled that with class. I was very impressed with how he handled that situation. In particular, he handled this situation with class. He doesn't get the respect that he deserves. A lot of people think he's a bus rider coach. He's just sitting in a chair while Joe Burrow is doing everything. And that's just not the case. He's a very good coach, and I could tell those things. He has a great DC in Lou Amarillo. He was able to retain him. Okay, they're playing good on that side of the ball. He's number 2 for me. And a close number 3 is Kevin Stefanski, because he had probably the 2 best wins of his career coaching with PJ Walker when they beat the 49ers, when they didn't have Watson, when they won back-to-back games with PJ Walker, okay, against the Colts the following week. Those are 2 highlight wins right there. So when we talk about Kevin O'Connell and how he's able to win without a starting quarterback and how he had his 2 best wins of his career, I can say the same thing about Stefanski. So I don't even know Mike Tomlin's number 2 or 3 in that division, much less we putting him number 1 in the whole entire NFL. We need to stop the popularity contest, with all due respect. Let's talk some real football.
Please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. We're slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.